this is the year of Skadeglädje. No other year have I been this happy to follow the game industry, guys. Have worked it for many years. I've never been this happy before. The game industry, 2024, had so many massive failures, right? Which of course then really inspired my Skadeglädje or Schadenfreude. So you probably heard the word Schadenfreude before, right? Which is the German word for like taking pleasure in other people's misery. But this is actually a Swedish word, first of all, called Skadeglädje. And that is a much more Swedish concept, because all of Swedish comedy is basically around Skadeglädje. So as a Sweden, I have worked of course also in Swedish game industry, this year has been amazing, right? All these terrible games failing, all this incredible PC vote for whatever, right? All these insane, stupid AAA games, way overpriced, failing. I have enjoyed it so much, guys. So, without further ado, I'm gonna make a top 10 list of the game's biggest failures, right? Which has triggered my Skadeglädje over and over again, and I really have enjoyed making this video, guys. And the title is not clickbait, seriously. Number one in this video, guys, number one in this top 10 is a game you probably haven't even heard about, okay? But this company, I must put it too much here, but this company's stock went down 99%, okay? So even though Ubisoft and other companies also have massive failures, this is, I think, factually the biggest failure this year, actually. So I don't think it's clickbait because it's gonna shock you guys, because you probably haven't heard about this company, but I will give you the receipts, I have the evidence, and we're gonna laugh at it. It's gonna be really fun. But anyway, number 10. So number 10 then, unknown number 9, will be perhaps more fitting as number 9, but whatever. So this game I feel took everything that we're tired of, right, in the year 2024. It has, first of all, is terrible gameplay, right? The stealth doesn't really work, you can see it here, many samples of it. And it has this very very trashy, to at best mid gameplay, right? And that to me is the first and foremost issue with most of this gameplay. It just kind of sucks, right? Then it has this like ambiguous, like something vogue main character. Of course, a lot of these games are vogue or broke here. Of course they are. And this is again, you know, another like kinda ish something. It must be Forspoken, right? It has like a very mid gameplay, and again some kind of mid, you know, very uninterested looking main character. But I also want to point out that it's interesting, right, that even the journalists, right, the shills that would at least pretend that Concord was good, and would pretend that Dustborn was good or whatever, they don't even pretend this game is good. It's just a very at best mediocre game to that. But the reason it makes the list, though, I think is because of Bandai Namco, right? So it is very similar to Concord. And yes, obviously Concord will come later on this list, don't worry, guys. But it is just funny. I think it's really funny that Bandai Namco is like, oh, this Unknown 9 is going to be our next giant franchise. It's going to be super good. It's going to be, we have like 20 games in the pipeline. And it's just like, huh? Because the game, again, right, if we ignore all the obvious, like, current year, votes, blah, 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 ignoring all that, right, again, the game is just very trash, right? The game, at best, is like a 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10 gameplay. But I wouldn't even say that, right? So even if you ignore all the politics around the game, it is still a very, you know, bad game, right? And why is Bandai Namco sitting like, oh, this game is going to be worth $1 billion in 10 years? You're like, this is just crazy, right? And that being said, though, it's only number 10, I feel, because obviously keep comparing to Concord, right? Because it's very similar to how Sony was pushing Concord, right? But of course, Sony has spent more than like 10 times more money on Concord. What we know, at least, right? So this game was still like a cheap mistake for Bandai Namco, right? But overall, I also want to bring it up first because I'm hoping, right, that we can see less of these kind of just terrible games made, like published and like, you know, sponsored basically, right, by the Japanese, right? So Square Enix, for example, has done it for many years, right? Bought or built studios in usually USA or Canada, and all of the games have basically failed, right? Again, then Concord later, right? Sony, this game, Bandai, so on, etc. There are many examples of failed games with Japanese, you know, like build them up outside of Japan, right? And to me, this never made any sense, right? You know, and I hope of course, we see less of this thing, not only because this always basically fail, but also because, as you can see with, like Wukong, Skadeglädje and so on, right? People in the West wants to buy these East Asian cultural games, right? We don't want to buy these terrible Western games. So it is really weird to me. Hopefully this teaches by Namco a lesson, but probably not, because they are terrible as publishers in overall, right? But anyway, to number 9 then. Number 9. Yrkeshögskola, wherever it's pronounced, 100 Chronicles. Straight up, guys, this was a video where I was discussing game design, right? Game design principles, game design, whatever, balance and so on. This will be number 1. This is by far the worst design game this year. It's an absolute horseshit of a game. That being said, this game is actually probably the only game in our list that made any money. Now, I already made a video, of course, reviewing this game. It's a very long review, it's like an hour long. It's the only review you'll find on the internet, right? And I went over how this is just the worst game ever, compared, of course, to Suikoden 2, which is an ancestral game is built on, right? So, if you don't know about this game, then it basically is Suikoden, right? It's one of the most classic JRPGs to PlayStation 1, and they kickstarted a new game of it, basically Suikoden 6, right? But the game is basically just, first of all, it's unplayable on Switch, just straight up. The game doesn't work on Switch. It crashes all the time, you can be like saved, locked permanently, and so forth. So it literally does not work on Switch. Like, objectively does not work. That obviously is a flop by itself, right? But now, the game itself is just, you have the easy recipe, right, of classic JRPG, again, PlayStation 1, and they failed in every measurable part of it. The storyline is insanely bad. Like, it easily is genuinely like a 0 out of 10 storyline. And the only thing they do is they keep trying to like make the world, the lore building, somewhat like the previous Suikoden games, right? But they rename stuff, or they have this lens of runes or whatever. But all the characters is terrible, and it's like it's funny bad, okay? For example, you can have, spoilers now than story-wise, you have a city being invaded by zombies, okay? So you leave the city, right, run away with you guys, zombies come in. But you can actually go back to the city at any time in the game, even the zombies are still in the city. You can go into the city and you can talk to like shopkeepers and just like, talk to random villagers. They're still standing in that city. So they're so lazy, so they couldn't even like move the NPCs away from it, and there's so many bugs in the game and stuff like that. So the game is incredibly lazy done, okay? For my actual story and this so forth. But now the work of the game, like I said, we need to through to understand it in more details. But it is that you have 120 playable characters, right? But it's basically only like 4 or 5 that works, because magic in the game has no effect, okay? So let's say you have a spell, right? It costs 100 mana, and you have like 110 mana. So you can take 1 fireball, and then you're out of mana until you rest again. And you can't use items to play it hard, okay? So you can only use 1 fireball per like dungeon, right? But the fireball does like 70 damage, and a normal attack is like 100 damage. So not only can you only throw 1 fireball, it does less damage than a normal basic attack does. So every mage in the game is his point, and they get Momo. Okay, Momo is the only playable mage in the whole game basically, until very, very late game. And every other character, of course, that uses magic is just pointless tonight. Physical brute tank guys are the only playable characters. Not only that, healers are also pointless, because all healing magic is based on max health. So while the character has like magic points or int or whatever, right, it doesn't matter, because a tank can heal himself more, or rather the same as a healer can, right? So there's no purpose having healers, because you can basically throw 1 healing spell per dungeon, right, in the beginning of the game, and you can just have then, of course, your tank healing himself, right? Because he heals the same amount as a cleric would do. But they also have, 10 times more health points and more damage. So in the end of the game, you just have like 6 tanks, or like 6 bruisers, guys. Just fighting all the time with auto attack and do more damage than magic. And that's the first 95% level of the game. And in the last 5%, you get this like incredible OP magic girl, and she does that insane amount of damage. And then a few other are kind of valuable late game, because you have so much more higher stats and better spells. But it's like still basically pointless. You have one Mobo and 5 bruisers. It's just ridiculous. And then also everything else in the game is like bugged, and I mean literally. And if you go on the Reddit page, I think it's a funny thing, because people will of course cope, because this game is just a famous, right, spirited sequel, right? So they will pretend it's a good game, but half the Reddit is like hates the game, and the other half is like, oh, it's the best game ever. It's really, really coping. So what I mean is that even the copers will admit that it's buggy like hell, because in this game, just like the previous games, right, you can combine attacks then. Like 3-4 characters, 2 characters can do different combo attacks, right? So if you have 2 characters that each deals, let's say, 100 damage per attack, right? If you combo attack them, they will both, spend their turn, right, to do like a cooler, better combo move. And that should at least do then 200 damage, right? Because, you're combining 100%. No, it does like 2 damage. Like, it's just straight up bug. Like, all these combo moves in the game doesn't work. You don't do anything. And I think the magic might be the same thing too, where it's like everything should be basically, multiplied by 10 or something. So the gameplay is completely horrible, it's just completely buggy. And lastly, you have this strategy gameplay that also doesn't work. So in the old games, you had the typical turn-based, like Fire Emblem similar strategy game. But here instead, it's basically a 3D thing, and it's just purely like cutscenes, but it's like incredibly slow, and it also crashes all the time. But anyway, my long video covered it much better. But basically, this is by far the worst game I played this year. Like, seriously, this game is much, much worse than Concord, the Dustborn, and so on. These games are coming on the list, I know, but this game, again, from an actual gameplay standpoint, it is the worst game I played this year. Easily is the worst game. That being said, like I said earlier, it's actually the only game off this list here that made any money. So it's like, wow, yeah. So in that's why it's only number 9, right? Because while it is the worst game, I easily rather play, genuinely, I rather play the other games in this list than this game again. But it is actually the only game that made any money. That being said, though, I extremely much doubt that this game company will make more money right on this game or this franchise, because I think it is a really terrible game. I mean, an insanely bad game. And it feels like half the fans are admitting that it's absolute shit, and the other half are coping, right? But what I mean is that usually what the effect, right, is you see coming to that in the next game too here, is that when you have a franchise, right, this game is built on the Skadeglädje franchise, very, very famous franchise in the JRPG, culture of the whatever gamers. The first game is kind of like a freebie, right? I bought the game because I'm a huge fan of obviously the old games, right? But now I will never buy a game from this company ever again, of course, and that's probably half the customers, right? You see this all the time with, for example, games or movies, but games. For example, Star Wars 8, right? Star Wars 8, terrible movie, hated by a lot of people, but that movie still made money, right? Then of course Star Wars 9, and the spin-offs, they are losing money because people are tired of the flops and so on, right? So I think very much this studio has flopped too, honestly. This game is just so bad that they probably can't sell more of this game. And we're coming, of course, to a Star Wars game sooner, guys. But anyway, number 8 then. Skull and Bones. What can I say? Really, really boring game. This is, first of all, one of the many Ubisoft failures, right? We're going to talk about Ubisoft a lot in this video. But as always, Ubisoft does terrible games. I've said it many years that I have often hated the games, right? I think a lot of people today hate Ubisoft currently, right, because of Yasuke. But I feel it, I always hated Assassin's Creed games. Like, honestly, I just find this really, really boring. That being said, though, I want to still remain on my last point, though, that 100 Heroes is a worse game, actually, from a game perspective. This game here is just really, really boring, right? Where 100 Heroes is actually, like, aggressively bad. This game is just mostly mundane, right? But, of course, Skull and Bones is still a game that Ubislop, as we love to call it, right, has been developing for years, right? It's been cancelled, or not cancelled then, but it's been like, put in the shell again, coming back later, half cancelled, coming back again. It's a game that they spent years and money on it, right? So it's a much, much more expensive game, and basically it's just really boring and generic. And I think people actually had hopes for this game, right? But its general gameplay loop is just really, really terrible. And I think this game just shows you how Ubisoft just keeps failing, right? Even if the game isn't necessarily, so to speak, woke or whatnot, right? We haven't even gotten to, I feel, the real woke games yet, right? And obviously, I keep saying it all the whole year, right? Woke games tend to be really terrible, but obviously you can make a game, and also being woke, and the game actually still being fun. Now, I have no examples of that, but in theory you could, right? But the general problem, and I said it in several videos last year, right? And check out my longer videos before Christmas, during New Year's, went over the gaming industry and explained, 3-hour video, talk about the woke in the game industry. And, one of the general issues, right, in the industry is just the lack of quality, right, in the actual developers. And I say developers, I mean everyone now. I mean the coders, the artists, the designers, the music, whatever, audio engineer, it doesn't matter. So I think this game here, if I'm gonna guess here, right, this game is just really, really boring, really overspending money by the right. But why? Well, Ubisoft, again, is a terrible woke company, right? And I don't want to overbe here and say, oh, everything is woke. But my point basically is that Ubisoft, right, has a track record of basically employing the worst developers. Seriously. I know a lot of people that work at Ubisoft. No, but genuinely, I actually do know a lot of people that work at, especially in Sweden then, and massive, right, in Malmö, and also some in Stockholm, and some more developers. But actually, I do know like 20, 30 people that work at Ubisoft. You know the guy that went out and critiqued Elden Ring back when that game was out, and he complained about the UX design Elden Ring. He worked on like Avatar, Pandora, so on, right? I know that guy personally. Yeah, I actually do know these people since I worked in the game industry, for many years. And Ubisoft again is a big company, right? Remember, it's a European company. I'm from Europe. My family actually lives in Paris. Some of my cousins all in Paris, etc. So I've been around the block, so to speak, with these people. And genuinely, Ubisoft truly is famous for being like the worst development of the AAA studios for many, many years. I hated them for a decade, right? And I probably maybe I'm biased, but whatever. My point generally here is that this game is just really, really boring. It's a bad game, right? And for all the money and all the PR and all for the years, it's a massive waste of money. But actually, arguably that, right, it isn't very woke actually inside the game for an Ubisoft game, right? So the later games that are coming from Ubisoft in this list, right, are obviously both then woke and of course terrible gameplay, right? But I think that you have to remember, right, I keep saying this thing here, you have to remember though that a reason that woke games fail, I keep saying it, is not necessarily because woke in a game, like a story level doesn't work, or having a woke character in a video game doesn't work per se. It's because people that want to have that are terrible, whatever they do. They're terrible designers, terrible coders, right? And Ubisoft also is famous for having way too many people. Compare Ubisoft to like EA and Blizzard or whatever, right? They also have way too many people working there, like per game, comparably. Which of course costs more money, right? Obviously, but also they get so little done, So Ubisoft, whatever, long start on my Ubisoft hate here. But honestly, spoilers, the next game is also an Ubisoft game, so I might as well, can I cover the next point as well, right? By the way, let's go to number 7 then. How? This game is so bad, Jesus Christ. So bad. So bad. I remember it was released, we were laughing at it at the office, we were watching this game at the office, and we were just laughing at it everyone. Because I work a lot with AI stuff, right? This is so incredibly bad, Jesus Christ. So, like I said, right, I work with AI and all this stuff too in my current job, right? So, me and my, let's say, partner, partner at the office then, him and me, we do a lot of AI stuff together. He's like the lead programmer, director of the AI, and I am the designer of the AI. And when the game was released, right, we just laughed so much at it. We were sitting down at the office together, watching these videos, people playing Star Wars, and we just kept laughing. Like, this game is the laughing stock of the industry. We're like, what is this AI? Like, what does AI have any memory for, right? So the best, my favorite one is when they jump in the grass, right, and they forget about she exists immediately, right? So usually you have an AI, and a better AI, is that you have some kind of memory, right? The computer remembers what happened a minute ago, right? But this AI here doesn't remember what happened the last second, right? It's the worst AI. This honestly probably is the worst AI this year, easily in video game industry. It's so bad. Anyway then, okay, obviously then, number 7, Star Wars Outlaws. First of all, this game has sold, millions of copies, right? Or I don't know, but it is sold millions valuable, so to speak. Yeah, it's a Star Wars game, right? This game is hard in that sense to measure how big a flop it is, but I think we all expect it to be like, well, yeah, of course, it said millions. It's like one of the biggest franchises in the world, right? Very, very popular franchise still, even though it absolutely is losing its fans every year, Star Wars, so it's kind of like a dying franchise, but whatever. It's still big enough to sell copies, right? But I still think that we can all agree on that, no, this game has clearly been a monetary lose for Ubisoft, and of course Ubisoft stock is crashing, right? Come more to that later. Because, yeah, I think this game, like I said, we expect to sell 1 million copies, right? But this game probably would have sold like 10 million copies 10 years ago. This game would have sold way more copies if Ubisoft and this kind of insanely terrible AI and gameplay and speaking wouldn't be so known, right? And one thing I think we have to think about here as well, because it's flop here, is Yasuke, right? Is Assassin's Creed Ubisoft. Obviously, Ubisoft Assassin's Creed is, you know, a massive failure of a game. Talk about it more later. But in general, though, I think we have to remember, whatever we call it, like remember, or you have to understand the contextual of the world, right, so to speak, because we can't ignore it, though. Just because that game hasn't been released yet, but has so many bad news, right? The Yasuke stuff started a little bit before the summer last year, and this game was released a little bit after the summer, right? So there's been like an uphill of hatred towards this company, and obviously people are so tired of the, you know, really buggy Assassin's Creed games. And overall, Ubisoft games are just terrible. They're so buggy, yeah. But I think we can't just, I keep saying it, we can't not also, we have to remember Yasuke as well. Yasuke is like a, as I say, a wet blanket over this game. That's the way I will look at it, a wet blanket. Yasuke is just like shimmering over all these Ubisoft games after Shadow was announced, right? And everyone hates that game, right? Oh yes, I know some super far left wokest pretend to like it, but even they hate it honestly as well, right? Because the gameplay in that game is gonna be shit as well, right? But anyway, so this game comes out, it sells very few copies, right? Comparably to what it should have done, and I honestly think that if we didn't have Yasuke being announced this year, let's say Yasuke was announced today, right, you know, like a half year later after this game was released, I think this game probably would have sold, honestly, probably double the amount of copies easily. Just again on the name recognition and big company, a lot of PR, right? Like seriously, yeah. That wet blanket from Yasuke, I think cost them half the set in this game, right? Because again, everyone is so tired of Ubisoft, thanks to Yasuke. He's a massive, you know, peak woke thing, right? And everyone's so tired of it. And all the YouTubers, all Twitch streamers, everyone makes fun of Ubisoft for months. That this game is released and it's so terrible. All the items didn't work. It's so buggy, and you know people just went on that, right? Because people know it's easy content, right? So yeah, absolutely. I think that if without Yasuke, this game probably would double the copies. It still would of course be a terrible game, but honestly, I think that probably would have it at number 10 maybe if Yasuke wasn't released then. But anyway, what more can I say? That this game is just really shit as well. Yeah, just like Skull and Bones. The game barely works right. Obviously, I keep saying it, but the AI especially is really buggy. But everything else in the game is just kind of meh, right? And then, of course, also it's very, very woke. You can't ignore that. We all know that, I don't remember what her name is now, but the female main character, who cares, right? But she's really ugly, right, comparatively. I wouldn't say she's the ugliest video game character, though, to be fair. They're obviously worse, like Fable and so on. But it's that, you've probably seen it, right? But if you compare her to, of course, the actual actors playing her, right, the model after her, she looks way prettier, right? And the classic woke thing was like, they take an actor and make her uglier for some reason. Like, what's the point of that? Yeah, it feels kind of mean to the actor. Usually, you go the other way around, right, back in the past, and so forth. So, you know, it's just all this... it's all the cornerstone of a terrible Ubisoft game. But overall, it's just a really, really bad game. And obviously, if it didn't have a Star Wars skin, this game would have sold like one copy. It would have sold less than Skull and Bones, absolutely. Anyway, number 6 then. Kevin Conroy's last performance, guys. Kevin Conroy's last performance. Amazing. Amazing! I mean, you can't think about it. How terrible this game is. And how they basically like killed their own, you know, franchise. And here they kind of symbolically shoot their old franchise, right? And now no one respects Rocksteady Studios anymore. Yeah, they completely ruined their own franchise. 100% there. He's the good guy though, Holly. Good point, yeah. He's a good guy. Deep down, man. You would think that the Batman would actually easily be beaten by his performance, but whatever. This is probably the worst in the course this year, easily. Course. So what can I say, right? I mean, honestly, number 6 here, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. I think in a normal year, first of all, this probably will be number 1, right? You know, this tells you how incredibly bad 4 has been. I mean, or fun, I see, yeah, Skadeglädje. Or Schadenfreude maximized. But, I mean, this game is just terrible, right? It's just it's a really bad game. And I think, without even going into the woke stuff, coming to that later, I mean, you know, I love Mr. Freeze, right? Before you go into that, this game is just bad. like, just, again, actively a really bad game, right? And I keep saying it, right? But this is kind of why, this is the main reason why woke games fail, because people that are very woke are just very talentless, right? Not every person, some few wokies are actually, really talented and have skills and so on. But the general, very generic woke person is a talented hack, right? They got hired because they have the right opinions, you know what I mean? And worst of all, I would say though, is that they ruin it for everyone else, right? They're always fighting with their co-workers and they need the most help and all this stuff, right? Again, check out my longer video when I explain all this stuff in 3 hours, so if you really want to learn how the mentality and how the industry works. But anyway, I digress. The issue, right, is that this game is just honestly insanely bad, right? I keep saying it that 100 Heroes is probably the worst game this year from a gameplay standpoint, but this also is maybe the second worst game I played this year. This game is just really bad, and I thought I broke a record, but it's hard to explain, right? I find the game is so incredibly boring. You jump around, right, on the buildings, and then you teleport and shoot stuff, and this game to me, I knew it was going to be a failure before I played the game, right? For 2 reasons. First of all, it had been obviously delayed, and actually, I'm a friends with the design director in this game, so I knew some insights that there had been a lot of issues in this game production, right? So so I knew that the game was delayed for actual, real, again, systematic issues inside the company. Okay, that's number 1. But number 2 reason, which I think is more important now than the video here, while I knew it was going to fail, was because I heard that there wasn't much big difference, right, between the characters. And as soon as I saw the game coming out, I think that's the biggest know-how, or whatever you call it, indicator, I suppose, where you know this game is terrible, right? Because you can play Harley Quinn, you can play, Captain Boomerang or whatnot, right? And it doesn't really matter, you know what I mean? Harley still uses guns. This is why I put it here too, yeah, she uses guns, right? Everyone in this game is an FPS character, right? Or a third shooter, whatever you point. They all use guns. They're all gunslingers. Captain Boomerang is a guy that never uses guns, he uses boomerangs, which is honestly just stupid. But he's a bad guy in a superhero stuff, right, So he's somehow better with boomerangs than normal guns, right, That's kind of his thing, right? So Captain Boomerang should only use different kind of boomerangs. Just like Hawkeye would only use different kind of, arrows and different quills or whatever, right? And bolts and so on. And same with, of course, Green Arrow or Red Arrow and so on in the comics. These characters tend to have, incredible accuracy, and they use weird tools, right, to fight instead. So Captain Boomerang should have, trap boomerangs and teleport ranks and this and that, and it'd be, much more interesting, right? That'd be his stuff. Harley Quinn obviously should only fight basically in melee, right? With her hammer and martial art and acrobatics, right? She shouldn't even have a gun at all. She'd basically be on the melee. Obviously, so forth, right? So, at this point, this game is just terrible. Oh, so you have, 5, 10, 20 different, doesn't matter, bad guys, right? But they all play the same, so they have one mechanic, how they teleport or move, rather, is different. Because, already from that point, it's but what's the point of not buying, Mrs. Freeze or whatever, right? Because it's well, it's the exact same gameplay, more or less, right? A very, very similar gameplay with the DLC characters. So at that point, like I said, before you play the game, I knew it's gonna fail because that is incredibly boring game design, right? To have a bunch of heroes. For example, currently we have Marvel Rivals, right? Very popular. I think it's a very good game. It's very fun. Obviously, it's Overwatch, but whatever. But in Marvel Rivals, you obviously have 30 playable characters day one, right? And they all, of course, play differently. Now, some are very similar because they are both DPS, usually DPS similar, I would say. But for example, Namor can throw turrets down as with his squids, right? That's a very different gameplay than playing Iron Fist that flies around with martial art moves, right? They're both DPS, I think, but yeah, isn't he? Or is he? Namor might be support, whatever, I don't care. But the point is that they're very, very similar. They're not similar, right? They have some similarities, but also very different, right? So that's how the game should have been, right? Because obviously, and I want to put it out here as a game designer myself, there's nothing wrong having several heroes overlapping, right? I worked on many games where we have, let's say, 20 heroes, and I know that each hero has an overlap with 2 other heroes, right? So they only have 6, so to speak, 6 or 7 unique hero types, and each one are some overlaps, right? These 3 have a teleport. but maybe one has a teleport strike, and one has a teleport with, I don't know, you can teleport the allies, and the other one has teleport by themselves, right? So, again, you're sharing the same mechanic, but it's used differently, right? This game is just incredible failure, right? It's a loot shooter game, but they're less unique than like Borderlands characters. The guns are really terrible, and all the enemies are the same, right? So if all that being said, the game here has already flopped, right? It's a failure of a massive game, and now then we get the wokest, and then you get character that Mrs. Freeze looking like a rainbow flag, right? I mean, holy shit, man. This game is by far one of the worst games this year in many, many years. This is so peak woke that even the woke people are puking at it, right? Why is Mr. Freeze dressed in a pride flag? Come on, like, it's so ridiculous. And she got the like typical, boring hair, right? Oh, she got the typical hairstyle, and she's kind of masculine. She has like no actual eyes, right? It's just like it's a man basically, right? Yeah, this is so ridiculous. And this is an actual thing, right? This game is just absurd. And there's more to that. And not only is it vote with how it looks or whatever, but also it's sort of unnecessary weirdness to this game because so Mr. Freeze, right? He's an evil guy, right? But he wants to save his wife, right? Nora Freeze. She's frozen down, right? In stasis. And he wants to save her by finding a cure for her sickness. And he has to, do robbery to get money for her and so on and forth, right? And eventually in the comic books, she also becomes evil and becomes Mrs. Freeze then, basically. Evil version of Mr. Freeze, right, but as a woman instead. And she's a canon character, okay? So there is actually a Mrs. Freeze in the comics. Again, Nora Freeze, right? But in the game, Suicide Squad, it's Victoria Freeze, or something like that. It's like a gender-bender version of the typical Mr. Freeze in a pride flag, and she's gay and all this stuff, right? And it just feels so incredible. This honestly is peak Vogue, man. This character is genuinely the most peak Vogue ever, Mrs. Freeze. Again, she's gender bender. Why is she gender bender for? There is a female Mr. Freeze. Just take that already existing character, or you could of course use Killy Frost. I love Killy Frost, man. Caitlyn, a really cool character, yeah. Or you could use her, right? But no, we take gender bender male Mr. Freeze for some reason, and she's gay now or trans or something, and then she got a flag on her, and it's so ridiculous. It's all the checkboxes, right? She was a born man, now she's a woman, and all this stuff. She's trans, Mr. Freeze, or whatever. It's like all of it, right? It's just so unnecessary. Like it's, again, what if you had Mrs. Freeze, the actual Victoria Freeze, and she was gay now or something? That would still be very like on the nose, right? But it would be less, right? This basically is like they had all the Vogue ideas they could take off and threw them all in together, right? And obviously the rest of the game is just shit as well, but it's just like, this kind of stuff is just ridiculous, right? It's just so ridiculous. I keep saying it, but it's so over the top. No one takes this game seriously. And I keep saying it, as I said earlier, but like this game probably would be number one for me in a normal year, right? Where you take a beloved franchise, like the Batman Arkham games, and you kill that main character, Batman. Keven Conroy's last performance, he died in cancer, unfortunately, right, last year. And you take him and you kill him off, and this is terrible. And everyone hates it. Oh, sorry, he died 2 years ago. This is the 1st of January now. But yeah, so take all that stuff, you piss on the famous beloved actor and his character, and you basically ruin the whole franchise. Everyone who bought the game basically bought it on either, of course, PR, like this famous character's name, or because they love the Batman games, right? And this game is nothing like them. You couldn't even design a character differently. Then you make the worst DC character in history, basically. And also, like I said earlier, remember, right, that there's basically almost no gameplay difference playing character A and B. Yes, they have different like move mechanics, but 95% of the characters is the same, right? So why would you buy Mrs. Freeze when you can play a Harley Quinn instead? From an actual gameplay standpoint, there is actually again no reason to buy the character, more or less, right? And then choose a design. Who's gonna buy the thing? You have to actually pay extra for this skin. You have to pay extra to unlock this character, right? And you have to pay even more extra money to run around like a rainbow flag in this game. And I want to put out there, has to be said, right? I have no problem with pride or whatever, or gay. It's ridiculous, right? And this is the thing of that I keep saying it for many years now, but stuff like this, right, just makes us move back, right? If you are gay, you won't like this stuff, right? This doesn't represent you, right? It's just ridiculous, you know what I mean? This thing doesn't make people accept trans people more, whatever. This makes them less, right? Yeah, this only makes the movement go backward, right? Because again, it's so over the top that if you don't like two people before you play this game, you will like them less now, right? Because it's so ridiculous and whatever. To your point, like this doesn't move the needle in a good way. Just make people hate them more. Right? Yeah, it's so ridiculous. Like it's so incredibly, absurdly bad design in every way, gameplay wise, aesthetic wise. The enemy are the same thing, right? You fight them once, it's just so bad. But anyway, that's Suicide Squad. One of the absolute worst failures I've seen in my life. Obviously has lost $100 million, and it also cost like one copy. It wasn't already built on a very famous franchise and also having very famous characters. But again, James Gunn will probably make people go and watch some movies. But I think this is a very interesting thing because, like I said, I know people working at Rocksteady, and they had such a favorable fandom, basically, right? The company behind this game, and now everyone hates them, basically. Just everyone. This game is so bad, right? So it's just like that company might die now. Yeah, it's so incredibly, failed, and it's not like that Warner Bros. Or any company wants to give them more money, right? So they will probably, well, I heard at least, probably make a complete new game, right? Nothing to do with superheroes, and that's probably the only save, I think, to make a very, very different game, and there has to be a good game, of course. Whereas people will never trust to buy the games ever again, right? This game was like C out of 10, right? From a 10 out of 10 Batman franchise into a C out of 10. It's such an incredible difference, right, in quality in the games. But anyway, let's go over to number 5. Number 5, Space for Sale. And I'm thinking, it's a little bit cheap shot here because this game is only in early access or whatever, but it was released last year. You see the date there, right? And yes, you probably never even heard about this game. After all, I am basically the only person even talking about it on YouTube, right? I made a video about it last year, obviously links below then, where you can find a bigger take on it. But basically, this is a game where you can travel around some space survival thing, and it's made by a very woke Swedish game company. So it might feel very biased now. Oh, we're talking about Sweden now. But seriously, the only reason I know about this game is because one of the developers attacked me. I don't mean not physically, but over online, right? He made some really, really mean comments to me online, and threats, actually, I would say. But whatever, let's talk about it. So the game then is basically this like really meh survival game, and it's not a very good game, okay? It exists many better games in this category, but the real issue, right? So like I said, right, the reason I even know about this game is because one of the developers went really vitriol against me on Reddit, right? So I obviously has been very critical of games like Dustborn, which is coming on the list soon, of course. And Dustborn then is an incredibly woke game, right? I assume everyone at this point know about Dustborn in this video here, 100%. But this developer was incredibly aggressive and angry at me then, right, for some of my Dustborn videos. So he was like, "Oh, you're wrong," and he did something to me, which is called Call to Authority False, right? Where he's arguing that because he's a developer, he knows more about whatever is good or bad, right? You know what I mean? Which obviously is a very stupid worldview, always, right? Saying that, oh, I'm a professor, doesn't mean that you have to always be correct in your subject, right? If you're a math professor, you can still be wrong about a math question, right, or whatnot, right? So this guy is like, oh, you were wrong about Dustborn because he's a developer, he knows better than me, blah, blah, right? But of course, my comment back to that is, first of all, that's a stupid perspective, right? A fallacy. But also, I'm also a developer. So what, what I mean? So what does that mean, right? Does that nullify what you said or what I said? Because I have basically a point is that this guy is he's a super. My point basically is this guy isn't very bright, right? Because if he wants to argue, of course, that he is correct about Dustborn and I am wrong, given number of years of being a developer, he lost that, right? So not only is that again a fallacy, but he also doesn't have what is called an authority, because I actually have worked for like 10 more years than he has, right? So what can he say? And obviously he also has never worked in a game that sold many copies, so he doesn't have the popularity either. Now, I don't want to make the video about me and some ranting with some game developer, but its context matters here, right? Because this is the whole thing, right? I have never even heard about this game. This game is just a massive flop that when I shipped out, they had 3 concurrent players. It actually has performed worse than Dustborn. This is actually, to what I know, the worst performing game this year, like straight up. There's no other game released this year that has as few players, right? And again, my whole story there of me and the developer bickering back and forth, right? This is why I know this stuff, right? Because this guy kept, as I kept saying, attacking me, right? Again, verbally, but yeah, he kept attacking me. So I checked out, the DB stats, the sales stats, the reviews, blah blah, of all of his games, right? And that's how I know that his game is the biggest flop this year from an actual sales number. This is not, in that sense, this would be number 1, right? Because yeah, he has 3 players. He has 0 players currently when I'm making this video. When I made the last video, he had 3 players. So it is just kind of funny. I think Silver saying this. It's kind of funny, right? Having a guy telling me that he knows the industry better than me because he worked on this game. I'm just like, but your game has sold literally less than 100 copies. It literally is performing worse than Dustborn. But arguably, I guess you could say that I'm going to say it. Maybe he thinks that Dustborn selling 500 copies is a good thing compared to his own game that has sold, 10 copies. But obviously, it's just really stupid. But that being said, though, I want to point out, though, right, that this is again go woke or broke. Okay, this guy is very, very woke, right? And all the developers I talk to this company are very, very woke. Okay, this is a little inside info there. But obviously, this guy angered me, right? I talk to all developers too, right? I thought this guy's harassing me, whatever, so forth. So they're very, very woke, right? And as I said earlier, in my older videos, right, these woke developers have no skills, right? They're incredibly talented hacks. And I have no problem if this guy watches this video now. They're Euro hack, okay? You know what I mean? He knows who I am. He knows. I told him this in his face, so to speak, before, right? So this is no news here, right? He always wants to like me, and you hate me, whatever, right? You know who I am. When I learned about his game, right, when he was attacking me on the internet, and I checked it out, you can't Google this name. Google this name. You won't find the game, basically. Space for sale is 2 very common words, like sale and space, right? So people are gonna, if you Google it, you're gonna find people selling stuff, right? People selling stuff online, people selling, space, like housing or rooms or convenience stores, whatever. Yeah, it's just it could be honestly be the worst game name I've ever seen in my life when it comes to search algorithms, seriously. And that thing has value today, right? Again, incompetence. Seriously, this is honestly probably the worst game name I've ever seen in my life. Genuinely. You can't find this game at all. It's no wonder this game is a massive flop and no one heard about it because you can't even find this game, right? Even when I know what the game is called, when I search for this title, the Google doesn't show me this game at all, yeah. Space for Sale, man. It is the worst name I think I've seen in years. Jesus Christ. But anyway, number 4 then. A beloved game. Number 4, Dustborn. I mean, it's finally here, right? This game is legendary, so to speak. And first of all, I have to mention, of course, that in an interview, the director of this game actually mentioned me. He didn't say a name, but he mentioned my video, definitely. And he talked about my video. And it's funny because in 2 of my Dustborn videos in the past, right, I was attacked heavily by the same person on Twitter as well, and on YouTube, which is an employee on Dustborn. I'm pretty sure on this. No, I'm like 99% sure it's a female employee there. And Dustborn is utter joke. What more can I say, right? But of course, Dustborn is this year's most woke garbage, right? And that says a lot, right? Because this game, I mean, it says a lot because think about what I said earlier in the video, right? We have huge amount of failed woke games this year. We've never seen so many go woke or broke in the game industry in one single year, right? And again, Dustborn is number 1, straight up, from an actual, how woke it is. It is obviously not number 1 here, still though, right? So number 4 on the actual, failure. But I mean, just from, how intensified woke it is absolutely number 1 when it comes to that. So in that regard, Dustborn is the winner of who's the most cringy woke garbage you can be, right? Absolutely. But I still think we have, of course, some other games that flopped more, right? And mostly the reason Dustborn isn't the winner then is, of course, because it is pretty cheap, right? Did it cost much money from the Norwegian government that my parents paid to? Yeah, so I'm in love with Dustborn, right? Links below. And that also, of course, a huge issue with Dustborn is that it's basically all founded by the government, mostly of the Norwegian government, also a little bit of the European Union, and also a little bit of USA, but mostly then the Norwegian government, with both of my parents, work in Norway and pay taxes. So basically, my parents paid for this game, right? Super fun. I thought about it on the video, right? But yeah, it is insanely big issue in Norway, same thing in Sweden. And just sounds quickly here, when it comes to that, cultural taxation, that has been an issue my whole life, right? So, just give a very brief summary here then. Basically, right, Sweden and Norway and Denmark and Finland, all the Scandinavian countries have this like cultural institution, kulturmyndigheter, something like that, in each country. And they get a lot of funding, like millions of dollars every year, right? And then they give them out, of course, to make, usually when I was a kid then, they would make these incredible, terrible, left-leaning, communistic woke movies, right? Of course, we didn't have the word woke then, we call it PC, right, PK, but basically usually insane left-leaning stuff, right? And today then they also pay for like some games and so forth. And this happens also in Sweden. As I mentioned, the last point, number 5, right, is also somewhat subsidized by the government, but we have other games in Sweden which are very, very paid by the government as well there. But so that's an issue just overall in Scandinavia, that the government pays for these incredible projects, right? But it's kind of fun thinking about it, because this is a game, right, about fighting the establishment, paid by the establishment. that is Dustborn, yeah. It is a game that would never exist if the taxation government didn't pay for it. Basically, as it turned out, right, and I know people that worked in this game, and I know people in Norway, and Norway is a very tiny country, right, very few game developers in Norway, and this whole studio would just never existed without constantly getting taxation from Norway, tax money. So the next game, called Project Svalbard, which I also made a video about, is also 100% paid by the government, right? So this company and their insane ideas would actually never, of course, be possible to have tax money. And you need to think about what these games are fair to them, because I mean that just shows you that this game and also the other games they have made, and the opposite, also the next game then, it is games that no one wants, right? There's no market for this game. There's just no income to be made in making this absolutely the most far left-leaning, garbage, communistic agenda, whatever game. There is no market for it, right? It really isn't. Even the far left doesn't buy this game, right? So, again, it has to be paid. Only the government can create this kind of, mess of 100% vote, right? Yeah. Truly. But like I said, this has been an issue my whole life, right? Growing up, I've seen it mostly then with movies, right? In before, but now also then with games then. So the movies I grew up with, and obviously I don't mean every movie, I mean the movies from the government, so to speak, are all the same. So Dustborn didn't surprise me in that sense, right? Like I said, having seen these movies that, what's it called again? Norsk Filminstitution, yeah. NFI or something like that, whatever it's called, the actual government part of Norway. But having seen the movies that they have made, right, like 20 years ago when I was a kid, of course I didn't expect Dustborn to be a good game. I expected it to be, the same shit as always, right? And I probably don't have to point this out, but very obviously the reason they're all so incredibly left-leaning, right, insanely woke, is of course because who do you think works at the cultural ministry in Norway and Sweden and so on? Obviously, far leftists, right? It's just a very inherent thing. Like, if you are, let's say, a right-wing person in the government in Sweden or in Norway, whatever, so on, you probably work for the military, right? Or you STEM, whatever. But you get my point. Like, it's much more likely that if someone is right-leaning or very right, they're going to work in a cultural ministry, right? Like, it's just very unlikely. So everyone working there are, of course, super woke leftists. Obviously, Norway is an incredible woke country to begin with, and they obviously then pay, right, for these kind of games. They're never gonna pay for a right-leaning game, right? If anything, that this game is so incredibly woke is the reason they got paid to begin with, right? They would not get paid if they weren't as left-leaning as they wanted. That being said, I do think there is a scam going on here from this company, as I said in my previous video, because in all the other games they have made, those games have been at least focused on some kind of heritage to Norway. Like, for example, they made this game called Draken something, and it takes place in Norway, you know what I mean? Svalbard, of course, is an island, north of Norway, it's a part of I think it's the seed lab, right? It's Svalbard. So that also is a part of Norway. So in the other games they made, every game is in Norway. So at least you can understand why the government pays for that, because they want basically games to be made, right, that takes place in the home country, so to speak. So this game, I think, is interesting, generally that point, and I haven't been able to tell that because I know a lot of people in Norway, in the government. I have a lot of people I know there actually. So I've talked to people I know, and this is actually an issue in the government in Norway. I'm not like an issue in the... It should be a bigger issue, honestly, on the news, but I have talked to people I know that works in like the... What's it called? Kansliet in Norway and so on. And they have said to me that this seems to actually be a scam. And I mean genuinely that this seems to be a scam, right? Because again, this company was supposed to make yet another game in Norway. This game takes place only in America, right? So we will see if they get more funding. Hopefully the government doesn't give them more money after this game, right? Because it is strange on that notion. I mean, obviously the government is very woke and they don't have a problem with that. But I do think that it's like, well, but isn't it supposed to be like about Norway, right? To some extent. Sure, it could be like a black woman in Norway, but it's supposed to be about something in Norway, right? So actually, I think the game is worse and a big flop in that sense too. But like I said, obviously no one wants to buy this game, so it's only the government that makes the game exist to begin with, right? So yeah, if they lose government funding over this game, which I ever hope they're gonna do, right? Then this company is bankrupt, absolutely. 100%. But what can I say more? I mean, without even going into Dustborn 2, honestly, I just feel like everyone knows what Dustborn is, right? This is the most woke thing ever, but basically, the gameplay is terrible too, right? I always keep saying this thing, but you can't forget that the gameplay also is shit, right? It's just like, not a very good action game, right? And I'm not surprised on that notion, because this company has only basically done, what do you call it, visual stories before. You know what I mean? This is not a company that are known for any kind of action, right? Or any 3D action. So I'm not surprised that they weren't able to actually make like a good gameplay, combat gameplay, whatever. Not surprised in that whatsoever. And honestly, this game of course is terrible, but it would be a better game as a pure, visual novel. Think about like in, what's it called, Fahrenheit, or like Heavy Rain, or Tropical Human, something like that would have worked better for this game. It obviously has a lot of choices still though, right? But instead of having combat, it could be like that instead. Only, that'd probably be a better game, right? Honestly. So it's kind of a mismatch from a gaming design standpoint as well. Doesn't surprise me now, because of course in this discovery of this game, we also looked at the resume of the game designers and were stealing pieces from GTA and it's all the terrible stuff, right? But also, I mean, just generally, right? Not to be that guy. I'm not saying that, women can't code or whatever, women can't game design, whatever. But when we get into this game, right, and obviously I know people that work in the company, but yeah, it's like, it's super woke. They only hire, non-white people. I mean, the director, the owner of the company, right, has said more than once that he tries purposely to not hire men and not hire white people, right? So you're gonna end up obviously with bad female game designers. Like I said, I'm not saying that females can't be good game designers, right? But when the director openly is admitting that he only has like female designers in his game, because he refused to hire any white guys, right? And he lives in like Norway, where most people are white. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, you're gonna have very few people you can hire, right? When you live in a country that are almost all white people, and you refuse to hire the white people, you know, you're left with a very few people in the game industry, especially then. And it's a very tiny country. So I mean, how many people was he actually, so to speak, interested in hiring, right, in the total? I mean, seriously, it can only be a few people in Oslo he could hire. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So stuff like that obviously again gives you this incredible, terrible game designs or coders or whatnot, right? But yeah, the biggest Vogue failure from an actual, so to speak, story aspect and cringe and so on, but quite cheap, even though it cost tax money, it was quite cheap. So not number one though. Now, what is number 3 then? Number 3, Concord. You just thought about it, right? Obviously, we mentioned it many times in this video, and it's hard not to keep comparing it to separate games like Unknown 9 or then Dustborn, right, on the Vogue scale or whatever. But obviously, Concord is, you all know, this has been the list, right? This is the least shocking example. This is probably, for most people, the winner of the year, right, in biggest flop. Monetary-wise, this is probably the biggest winner. They don't know exactly what it costs to make, right? But it's like maybe even $400. So it is an insane amount of money, right? So many $1 million lost in this game. But number 1 might seriously be a big lose totally money, actually, over the years, though. But regardless, obviously Concord, see it here, it's just a pretty meh FPS hero shooter game, right? That no one wants to play, right? For many reasons why. It's slow, the gameplay is meh. It's not as fun as Overwatch, not as fun as more Rivals, of course, compared to Simulator. But overall, obviously Concord is here because 2 reasons, right? It's super Vogue, not as much as Dustborn. As I said, Dustborn is more Vogue than Concord, absolutely. But every cat in this game looks insanely ugly, right? Everything in this game is just really, really appallingly bad. But also, of course, like I mentioned, because it costs so incredibly amount of money, right? So this game here is not the most Vogue game, but like I said, it probably is the most Vogue or broke from a purely like monetary standpoint. So many $1 million lost in this game, right? And mostly, again, because it's Vogue. That being said, though, I think it is fair to say, as always, right, that the gameplay kind of sucks. Again, right? Not that I think that, first of all, it's not necessarily that people are tired of the hero shooter thing. As we see with Marvel Rivals, right? Let's come back to that again. Marvel Rivals is just doing really, really good numbers right now. It's really fun to play. It's quicker than Overwatch. Great character design. So, no. People aren't tired of the hero shooter. People just want to play a bad hero shooter, right? Because the one thing that I think we see immediately when this game was released, right, is that Concord is a worse Overwatch, right? Nothing Concord does is better than the basic Overwatch game, right? And Overwatch, of course, was released many, many years ago, the first Overwatch. And this is not me saying that it's a saturated market. That's not my point. People love to cope and say that Concord only failed because it's saturated, meaning that we already have, too many people playing Overwatch or whatnot. No, that's not the issue, right? The issue is that this game is just worse than Overwatch. Marvel Rivals is strictly better than Overwatch. Not in every regard, but it is better because in Marvel Rivals, they've taken the heroes out of Overwatch and given them like 1 or 2 more mechanics each, right? So it's a very, very similar, it's copying and whatnot. But the point is that from a pure gameplay standpoint, Marvel Rivals feels funnier, right? Because you're playing a character and you have more options, you have more abilities, so forth, right? So it's like Overwatch, but more enjoyable. And also, of course, you can destroy the areas and so that. And you can combo with other heroes, you have some synergies, right? So it basically feels like Overwatch, but it's more, right? Marvel Rivals feels like the more Overwatch 2 than Overwatch 2 actually was, right? Now, of course, I will say this one thing, though, in Overwatch defense, Overwatch is less buggy than Marvel Rivals, though. It's more polished than Rivals on release. But I always felt that, this is me as a game designer too, I always felt that, what do you rather have? Do you have 30 polished heroes with 0 bugs, nothing ever crashes, or do you have 60 heroes, but once every 50 games you get a crash? Most people, of course, pick, actually, I want to have double the amount of heroes and get a random crash once per day or something. But that's actually more enjoyable because you get a better game then, right? but sometimes it crashes because it takes a lot of time, to make more heroes and do the code and design them and so forth, right? And I've been there in my life as a lead game designer where I have always decided that we're gonna have more stuff and less polish. I mean, you have to have a certain polish, right? But you don't need to have like a perfect polish. This game will never ever crash. It's a perfect, game, whatever. Then I'd rather have more heroes, more bosses, whatever, right? More classes, yeah. Of course, given that it's somewhat, it has to be polished, of course, to some degree, but some more rivals currently is going for that, right? Okay, it has a lot of stuff in the game, more than Overwatch had per hero. It's less polished, but it's more fun to play, right? That is a game that I will play over Overwatch because I enjoy it more, you know what I mean? But this game here is that example of the opposite, right? It just feels less than Overwatch. The gunplay are less interesting because the weapons are less interesting, right? The characters have fewer mechanics. Everything is just kind of worse than Overwatch. And also, it's less polished than Overwatch, right? So the gameplay in this game is just shit. No one's gonna play the game. It's not about saturating the markets, but this game is just worse than already popular established games, right? And there is nothing new to the table, so why would you play this game? But anyway, so that was the part of the whole gameplay, right? The game is terrible. It is just not good enough to release a game that, I keep saying it's just worse than other game was 10 years ago, whatever, right? And there's a big difference, though, in the genre also, right? So, for example, if you release a Japanese role-playing game, typical turn-based, old school JRPG, right, today, and had a really good storyline, interesting characters, good, romance or whatever, but the actual gameplay, the combat gameplay, is worse than a bunch of other JRPGs. That game might still sell, right? Because it's like, well, you're playing it perhaps based on the storyline, the romance, so forth, right? As long as it has like decent enough gameplay, you know what I mean? So in those games, you don't have to reinvent or whatever the wheel each time if it's like a single player game. And of course it depends on other kind of genre and so forth, right? But when you make a game then like a hero shooter, hero looter, these kind of multiplayer quick game, there's no storyline here, right? There's no lore, no one really cares about the characters, but this whole stuff, right? You're kind of like, but what is it then? This game is pure gameplay, right? In the end of the day, these kind of games, say if Overwatch and so forth, are all about the gameplay, right? It has to be enjoyable gameplay. You fight. Same thing with, Fortnite, Apex Legends, these are battleground games. You enter the fight, you fight immediately, and you run around and you fight and you die, you make a new game and you play, you know what I mean? So it's not so much like, it has to be either unique, right? It has to have a unique new take on this genre, which it doesn't have, right? It has to have a much more unique take on that, or it has to be just better, you know what I mean? And it simply will not get there, right? And everything I said now, of course, is objectively true. Like, this game isn't that good, right? Again, and we haven't even talked about the woke stuff yet, but I hit my point. I think it's important to mention this game is just pretty shit, right? It's pretty shit. And, however, is it shit because of the terrible character design, or people now? As everyone knows, Concord has one of the worst cast of all time, right? The characters are truly effing ugly. Like every goddamn character. And no one is white. No, but seriously. This is the one white guy in the game, right? But I think we also that green alien guy in the first trailer. You're like, oh, that's a white guy. He's the white guy, he's green, but he's clearly the white guy, isn't he? Like, come on, that's what I'm thinking about. But, no, this game, of course, has, again, just incredibly ugly design, right? And like I said earlier, it also has worse gameplay, right, than most other games in the same genre, right? It costs money. You have other games that are free to play and have better gameplay, right? And this is, again, before Marvel Rivals came out roughly the same time, right? Marvel Rivals dropped on the beta thing, kind of roughly the same time, Concord, and now the recently was released, open public now. And Marvel Rivals play is like 10 more times fun in this game, right? It moves better, more characters, cooler maps, map destroyed, and you have it's free. Why would anyone ever buy this game? It doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like the dumbest thing for Sony ever. Like, this game is just bad, and it costs money. Like, why? And on top of that, we have like the ugliest design ever, right? The characters are so incredibly ugly. And there's also another issue in this game per se. The winner of this list had the exact same issue, right? Massively. Also really ugly design, incredibly so. But also, not only ugly design per se, but an issue with these just absurdly bad designs, right, is that it also makes the game harder to play. So something that I brought up in the games I worked on for many years is that you have to what is called telegraphic character design. So telegraphic or telegraphing, right, is basically a thing you use in martial art or whatever, where it's like, oh, this guy's gonna kick me now because he's telegraphing his move, you know what I mean? In a video game, telegraphing means usually as a boss, this boss has a red blinking thing, right? Oh, that's telegraphing to me that this is a weak spot, you know what I mean? Or like this barrel is red or whatever, it's explosive, you know what I mean? That's telegraphic something. So telegraphic character design is when you can look at the character in the select screen, right? And say, this is a tank, you know? This is DPS, this is a healer, this is a tricky trickster character, right? If you have a really good character design, you can see immediately kind of what character they are, right? So for example, if I play a game like League and I see Teemo, goddamn Teemo, right? When I see Teemo, I'm like, this guy's probably some kind of trapper or something. He's like a tiny little guy with some blow. He's gonna be some trickster bastard that puts traps down, you know. You kind of know it, right? Because he looks like some kind of little bastard character. He's too tiny to fight physically, right? So you can have the feel, you know. But you see Darius in League, that guy is a tank, man. Big shoulders, big axe. That guy's obviously the tank, right? When you see Eloy or someone like that, that's a tank, you know what I mean? Most characters, in example League, even Dota and so on, right? Not Dota 1, but 2, you kind of can tell what they can do before you play them, right? So for example, that Darius can pull you in with his weapon. It's not something you can tell from looking at him. But when he does that, you're surprised, right? Because pulling someone towards himself, typical tank mechanic, right? So you can understand it from an inherent conceptual how he looks kind of thing, right? A more good example is very different. Well, look someone like Ari, okay? More League, whatever. But Ari in League, she's obviously the Kyuubi, right? The Kitsune, she's the Naruto. And when you see her, right, is an attractive woman with some balls, right? The spheres balls. She looks very attractive again, thin, you know, small stomach, big up eyes, right? You know, so forth. When you see her, you're like, oh, that's clearly a magical lady, right? She will fight with magic on range. There's no way that woman will go in and fight in melee. And she's in the tank because so forth, right? So you can kind of understand that she is a ranged magician, how she looks again, right? So that stuff is very important actually because it gives you a lot of user friendliness by understanding immediately what the character is, right? And even if you don't exactly understand what Ori does when you play the first time you face her in the game, you kind of understand that, well, she's some kind of far range character, looks kind of agile, so, you know, you kind of have an inherent take on what she probably can do, roughly speaking, right? And it helps you, again, as a player immensely, right? So a big reason why I hate these, woke, garbage, ugly characters because they remove that telegraphic design of looking at the character and I can guess what they probably can do to some extent, right? And having everyone be super ugly and fast or whatever means that who's the tank anymore? I can't tell anymore because you're all obese, right? If every character is obese, everyone's gonna tank, right? Tank is supposed to be the big muscular dude or brick lady with huge abs, right? That's a tank woman, right? But now everyone's fat instead. Everyone's obese. I'm just like, oh, they're all ugly and obese. So they're all tanks. It doesn't make any sense. Your brain can't comprehend it, right? So it's a huge issue with these games. And again, then the first winner of this has a second issue. But anyway, this game has all the issues, right? All these issues. All the wokest into it. And also then, of course, this massive issue when you work it, right? I keep saying it, but the dumbest thing I heard last year, honestly, is probably the whole, you have to call me the professor, right? Because I said it in my videos, talking about how I used to work in the game industry. He said, I have actually literally worked with basically the exact same person, right? That is like, you have to call me professor, or else I go to HR. And I was like, no, I'm not going to call you professor, because you aren't the professor, you know what I mean? So these people absolutely exist. I wasn't surprised when I heard about the conflicts, right, at the Concord team with these really weird woke loons, right, having these very weird opinions about life and so on. But basically, long story short here, right, I said many times, is that is the biggest issue with these woke games, right, is that the co-workers, the employees, right, at these uber woke companies are just completely not only talentless, as I mentioned earlier with the fifth one and so on, but also is so annoying to work with, right? Like I said, at number 5, that's Space for Sales Games. That guy, right, one of the developers of the game, comes out, attacks me openly, right, because of my Dustborn video, and this guy can't argue for a second, right, you know? He doesn't know how to debate, I own him completely, right? He's a complete moron, right? And I'm just like, yeah, typical woke guy. You have no purpose being in this industry because you actually have no skills, right? You can't even argue against me, you know what I mean? You can't even present a good argument. It's so embarrassing, that level of it, right? Do you think that these Concord developers are any better? No, they're the exact same, right? They are talentless, they have no skills, they're all hired because they have the correct value. I said it so much times in my life. It's called värdegrund in Swedish. You hire them because they have the same opinions you have, right? They're hired on nepotistic wokest ideas, right? They're not hired because they can code or art or whatever. And like I said in my long video, 3-hour video I did last week about how the woke mind works, right? The issue is that they also never improve because they get hired on nepotism of, again, then political ideologies, right? And then no one can ever critique them, so they never get improved because they never are allowed to have to actually, to be challenged, right, on either their beliefs or their skills. So this thing here is an incredibly ugly, failed character design, right? I have no idea what this character is in the game, genuinely. And I look at the character and I'm guessing maybe I have just no idea, right, what this character can do. It's so stupid. And this should never been passed, right, by the lead director of art design or game design. But because they have a woke studio, trust me, you're not allowed to say to the artist this game is shit, right, you know? So they just have to allow everything. And then you end up with this shit, right? So that's just absolutely, it's woke all the way through, right? And a massive failure. Yet, we have 2 more worse failures though. So, number 2. You know who is everyone's beloved Yasuke? That's right, it's pronounced Yasuke. Honestly, I do really hate how I see some people talking about this game right over this year, and so many people can't pronounce his name. I mean, it's like, but come on, man, it's like Sasuke in Naruto, you know, Sasuke, the guy that Naruto's in love with, his waifu, you know, like that character, right? You know, it's spelled just a J instead of an S, right? So it's pronounced Yasuke, not Yasuke or Yasuke or something. It's Yasuke, okay? You don't pronounce the U, okay? Japanese, you have to spell it like that. Anyway, number 2 is Yasuke. Okay, it is. No, some people might find this clickbait or whatever, or rage bait, I don't know what you call it, but it's like, how can you put the Assassin's Creed? Isn't even released yet. Exactly, that's how bad it is. This game is number 2 of the worst game flops 34. It was so bad that they had to, you know, delay it, right, for like another half year, right? That's how bad it is, like straight up. And I think it counts. It counts because it was supposed to be released, but it was so incredibly bad. It's just a flop, right? They had to, you know, redo it, you know what I mean? So right at that point, I think it counts. You can leave an A comment below, but I think it counts, right? Because it happened last year. However, the bigger issue, of course, as I said earlier, right, with Star Wars, I built it up earlier with Outlaws, right, is that Yasuke, being so incredibly hated, right, has made Ubisoft stock basically collapse, right? Now, of course, there are more reasons than just Yasuke itself, but my point is that I mentioned earlier is that Yasuke is like a wet blanket, right, over Ubisoft stock, right? Ubisoft's company has been in challenging waters for many, many years, obviously because they make terrible, shitty games overall, but this is clearly like we call it the last drop, right? This made everything in the water break, right? This is the last like dripple into that lake that collapsed the dam, and everyone just openly hates Ubisoft. Almost no one in the right mind defends Ubisoft. Only the hardest copers, hardest fanboys, right? Everyone that isn't a super hardcore Ubisoft fanboy hates this game and every other game they made basically this year, right? And neutral people, or ever hate about it, so forth. And that is, of course, this game's fault, right, you know? Obviously, the other games, mentioned earlier, Skulls and Bones, and previous Assassin games just kind of sucking and whatever, has all been a build-up for this thing, right? But I keep saying it, when this game was released, it just massively pulled out, and the damn crashed, and Ubisoft stocks, and all the other games has, of course, been... Because, I mean, the thing is that everyone knows what an utter pandering, garbage, woke bullshit, you know, Yasuke Floyd is, right? And this even been a thing, you know. This been a thing, right? People jokingly said he looks like George Floyd. But there's an interview with one of the developers saying that they literally designed him to look like George Floyd, right? And it's obviously that they changed whoever they were going to be in this game after happened with George Floyd, right? And then they put Yasuke in the game, or then their Yasuke Floyd version, right? As a massive pandering. I mean, everyone gets that. It's super obvious, right? And it is truly weak poke woke, right? It's just ridiculous in every shape and form. But like I keep saying, though, it is the second biggest flop this year because you just kind of, you know, again, put the wet blanket over Ubisoft because now everyone, right, even the lesser... For example, I talked to my boss when this happened a few months afterwards. He's a gamer. He's like... he's not old. He's getting too old to play video games? No, but he's obviously, you know, he used to play video games, right? He's a nerd. He's a great boss. But you know what I mean? He's getting up in age. He has a lot of children and getting up in age, you know what I mean? So he doesn't really play games anymore, right? He's a grandfather, you know what I mean? And so on, but he plays little, you know, he plays little games every now and then. So he's obviously very out of the culture speaker. And he mostly just plays older games that he played when he was young, you know what I mean? From the like 90s or whatever. But even he was just like, the just thing, goddamn, or, you know, goddamn, you know, idiots, the stronger word. Even he was like, I heard about this thing, it's so stupid, yeah. Like everyone, even like the normies, big man, knows about how dumb this is. Everyone gets how dumb it is. This is the ultimate dumbest idea any company has had 2024. The biggest flop in a sense by itself, right? Because everyone gets it. Okay, we're in Japan, feudal Japan, right? 15th, 16th century Japan. It's Sengoku period. Of course, this is 1580, 90, something, I guess, can take place. Maybe early 17th century, 1602 or 4, something like that. Perhaps this can take place, I don't know exactly. But we're in that Japanese time, right, around the shift there from like 1590 to 1605 or so, to go over period, Edo period, blah, 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 Sengoku period, so on, right? And we're playing a black guy. Like, you see, he's the only black guy in Japan, you know what I mean? And it is true, Yasuke is a real historical figure, right? That is basically one of the first black people in Japan. This is true. But again, it's very much like us, we're playing the only black guy in Japan as the main character in this, like, Japanese war. It's like golden armor, and everyone is like super, like, oh my god, it's the beloved Yasuke, and everyone goes on their knees and kisses his feet, like, yes, Yasuke sama, and so on. I mean, you know, it's just like so incredible pandering, right? And yes, it has been on other games before. For example, Neo, right? But in Neo, he's just like the one of the bosses, right? He's the second last boss in the game. He's just like, and he's in, for example, Guilty Gear. So Yasuke isn't a new thing to have video games, but I think that, for example, in Guilty Gear case, that's how it's been done before, right? You have Yasuke in these like multiple character player games, right? Where you have like 30 fightable characters, you have 30 different generals in some Dynasty Warrior game, whatever, right? And you have Yasuke there, and some Nobunaga's Revenge 7, you have Yasuke, whatever, right? So in those games, it kind of makes sense because he's just one of many supportive characters, right? And he's definitely kind of this legendary black samurai dude in many anime as well, and so on. So it definitely is like a trophy character, but no one has ever done this before. Like, he's going to be the main character of a gigantic AAA game. And clearly also, very obviously, this massive flop, right, is that it doesn't help that Ubisoft is not Japanese, right? If this was made by a Japanese company, this would be a completely different story, right? Because then people would have said, is from the inherent idea that, well, these Japanese people, they're making the game, probably have some idea, they probably know what they're doing, you know. But now it's like, no, this is like Montreal, primarily studio, Canada, is making this like blank die killing all the Japanese people. Obviously super woke and incredible lefty, and Japan, Japan hates communism, they hate left-leaning. Japan is a very, right-leaning conservative country, for that matter too, right? So they don't even like the whole Baiso, the whole white liberal left is not very popular in Japan, and not at all, trust me, not at all, okay? In Japan, if you're a white guy in Japan, you shouldn't don't come at them with your left at this, Japanese they like conservative, hardworking, right thing at this capitalism and so on. That's what they love in Japan. So because I'm generalizing, but still, right, this just comes off on every wrong way, right, from some like super woke leftists in Canada forcing the only one black guy, and it just makes really, really bad. It just seems crazy, right? And obviously Ubisoft are idiots, but this is just extreme. This is truly extreme, and it shocked me when I saw it, honestly, because even knowing how dumb Ubisoft are and incompetent they are, this feels like such an obvious PR nightmare, right? This is by far the biggest PR nightmare this year. It is insane. You're like, what were they thinking, right? So we can talk about for many ages here, but I feel like I don't need to say much more. We all know how terrible it is. But I think it's the general consensus of everyone hates this thing. How even people on the left are like, oh, okay, we're kind of dumb having the only one Japanese guy. And then also, we can't forget, oh, Jesus Christ, I may read about this before, but we also can't forget, of course, that when Yasuke is fighting, right, they're playing hip-hop music, which seems to me racism, okay? And I said it before, that to me is racist, right? So obviously mentioned earlier, right, with Dustborn and so on. I'm from Norway and Sweden, right? My parents live in Norway, work in Norway and so on, right? I had my first friend is black, okay? And I don't say this, but this is the honest truth. My first friend, his name is Ash's name, it's not a D, but so I almost said his name there. My first friend in life, childhood friend, he's a black guy, and he has 2 older black sisters. And the reason I know them very well is because when I was a kid, right, my mom and me, we were living basically in the poorest neighborhood in my hometown then. She used to split with my dad, and my mom had like 2 jobs. She working in double shifts, you know what I mean? And we had to move to this like terrible neighborhood and all that stuff, right? So I was like the only white kid in the neighborhood, don't even kidding. And the reason I know my friend very well then, right, is because my mom would usually then pay his older sister, right, to be my babysitter. So my mom would do like a double shift, you know what I mean, like working day and night, right? She would have like, I have to have some, evening hours, and so she would have like the neighbors then, which was my neighbors, right, babysit me, right? So I grew up a lot in their house, eating their food and all that stuff, I know his family quite well, right? And my long point here is that I'm not racist. It's like a black friend. I got like a black surrogate family, so you can't come with me. No, my point is that these colored people, right, to speak, that I grew up with, right, they're not Americans. You know what I mean? This is not in America, right? They don't like hip hop. Maybe they do now, but not kids. My point is that I honestly, gently find this game very racist too, right? And I'm not the only one, right? Because why is it that he's the only black guy in Japan? He's from Mozambique, right? Like Eastern Africa, and he comes to Japan and it's like hip hop fighting music. And you're like, but he's not from America. He's not African American. He's African Japanese, or he's just African, right? You know what I mean? So like I said, my surrogate family, friends I grew up with, they were obviously mostly that, Scandinavian culture, you know what I mean? Mixture with their parents being immigrants, right? So my friend and his 2 older sisters, right, they grew up in with the Scandinavian culture, and then also having a little bit of their family immigrant culture, right? So they're not very American, right? Their values are, of course, overlapping with American values like democracy and so on, right? But they don't have that, hip hop culture or whatever. They have they act very differently, right? So I think that's maybe why I feel honestly it's very racist, because coming as me then, right, from Europe, for me it's like I know a lot of black people and so forth, right? There are nothing like that stereotypical African American, so to speak, hip hop black person, right? which should be obvious, but when I think about these Montreal developers, right, I think they're racist, right? They're racist because they think that you have this Yasuke Floyd thing, and they're like, no, this is an amazing racist woke flop ever, right? Because they're like, oh, we're gonna have this guy, he's from Mozambique, it has to be like modern USA hip-hop music team. No, it should be more inspired by African stuff. I keep saying it, the family that I grew up with, they were, you know, people of color, they had nothing to do with American culture, right? I keep saying it. They have their own country culture, and, you know, their country they moved to, yeah. Nothing to do with America. Obviously, it should be obvious, right? So no, I find this game incredibly racist. It's insane. Like, it's just insane. So it even, that's kind of classic the Vogue though, but they even fail on that, right? They can't even comprehend what they're doing. Right? And then, that being said, obviously, I also feel it truly deserves to be the winner or the worst, or one of the worst this year too, because this game, even it never was released, kept having bad stories, right? Thomas Lockley is exposed, of course, the historian that lied about Yasuke. He got fired, basically, or like, you know, permanently, like, not allowed to teach anymore. And the program NOK, Nippon, got cancelled. And it's been a gift to keep giving. You know, they took Zoro's sword from One Piece as a prop, and they have that Hiroshima Jinya thing, and it's just like, it's been a nightmare for them, right? The stuff in the game is not based on Japan, based on China, and so forth, right? So this game, if the game wasn't even released, yet it is the biggest flop ever. And also, of course, we all know that I think this game, I mean, first of all, sorry, what I mean is that we all know this game is going to lose money. Yeah, we all know this game is going to be a miserable failure when it finally gets out, right? There is no way in hell that this game is going to make back its money. And spending like 6 more months or whatever, right, in production, is not going to help it, right? It is made by the most incompetent people at Ubisoft. If anything, it's going to be more buggy after 6 months, like seriously, right? And obviously the game was probably barely playable at all when it was supposed to be released. And normally Ubisoft would have dropped it, right, being barely playable. But now they knew that everyone was hating on them, so they have to be like, well, I guess we have to try to fix those bugs. But it's going to be fixed, right? It's going to be absolute horseshit when it gets out. And I think this game actually probably will cost more than Concord in altogether, especially accounting for how Ubisoft's whole company is collapsing to this game, primarily. Also, of course, every other game is shit too, but this game keeps reminding everyone how shitty they are. Where, while Sony's Concord failed, right, and they lost, obviously, then $100 million on Concord, it's not like the other thing Sony is doing isn't going back, no. The other stuff Sony is doing doesn't have like a minus sales because of Concord, right? But this game here, as I keep saying, has affected everything Ubisoft does, right? The whole company is close to bankruptcy thanks to this game. But most of this game. And to be fair though, I don't think Ubisoft will go bankrupt. The whole idea that some other company will buy them up is much more reasonable. They will probably be bought up as another company. There's a lot of rumors about that, right? Tencent and so on. And that is probably much more likely to happen than it is going bankrupt. I mean, it's a giant company, so they probably be bought up before they go bankrupt. That's for sure. That I believe in. But anyway, what's number one then? The company that actually did go bankrupt. 99%! So as I said at the start, right, not clickbait. Number one will shock you, because you never heard about this company, probably not, right, unless you followed my channel like this, but this company actually literally went bankrupt. Actually bankrupt. They had to call for bankruptcy this year. You can see it here, right, on the screen. This company down this year 99.19%. 99%, right? So this stock of this company called Fragbite then, which is the owner of the company we're talking about, went from, as you see here then, this is March here, right? It's up at like value 880, so that's kroner, but whatever, it's like $88 basically, right? So one share costs like $88. Then here's a little bit trouble. Here's some bad news are coming out here, right? Here they're bankruptcy, the game company we'll talk about soon. So now it's like 800, so it's like $80 then, right? For like, you know, one share. So it's in April, and now here in May, right? So it's like less than a month later, we're down 93%, right? So we're down almost, we're down like, what is it, 80, yeah, like $8.5 dollars. Like I said, this is $80, so then we're down to like $5 left. And then a little bit here, you know, classic, someone is hearing about maybe they're gonna be bought up, maybe someone's gonna save them, you know what I mean, and no, bankruptcy. 99% down, right? So this is the company share. They went from about then $90, and now one share is worth less than $1, 7 kronor, so it's like less than $1. And today is down 5% because whatever, people are still trading this like penny stock now, right? So this company is literally the biggest failure this year, 100%. I mean, honestly, right? We can talk about Ubisoft and Dustborn and all the stuff, but this company actually went bankrupt this year. Again, it went from a dollar value of about $90, and now it is worth less than $1. There's an $89 lose in like 2 months, okay? So there's like a 99% lose in just 2 months there. This company went bankrupt, right? They went bankrupt because they're working on this game called Alara Prime, okay? Alara Prime is a game made by this company called Fall Damage Studios. This company has been delaying this game for years, and they couldn't get a new, what's called publisher. We tried for a few years, that failed, and they had to go bankrupt, right? Because the company basically was on bankruptcy, close to it, for the last, I guess, 2-3 years, 4 years, and they kept being alive by getting new publishers, getting investors, right? And eventually this year, then 2024, no one wanted it anymore, right? So they massively failed, and the stock just collapsed completely, right? And like I said, I think objectively, this is the game's biggest flop. I was talking about the game, so don't worry, guys. Now I'm being very economic here, but I just think this point here remains, right? Because, like I said, this is the receipt, right? If you look at Ubisoft stock, right? Ubisoft is down like 80% or so in 5 years. So if you go to Ubisoft instead, right? It's down 42% this year, which is still incredibly terrible, right? And I keep saying it. Assassin's Creed is mostly, behind that, right? But as you look here, right, in the last 5 years, this is kind of where it topped here, right, at 82 euros per share. That was roughly when it was a top, and since then, right, it has been losing about 80, 81, 90%. It was a little worse over here, 84%. So Ubisoft is down about, again then, roughly 80% in 5 years, right? Fall Damage and Fragbite is down 99%, right, in 2 months. That is worse, okay? That is worse. Obviously, Assassin's Creed and the older Ubisoft games, Star Wars and so on, they're bigger games, they're bigger publishers, there's more money made there or lost than Concord, obviously, is the biggest, purely investment, right? But this game company actually went bankrupt, 100% bankrupt. So the actual company is called Fragbite, right? And they owned, or did own then, a few different game companies. Like I said, I brought the receipt, right? This is all public information. I was kind of find interesting people saying, how do you know this stuff and so on forth? Most stuff you can actually read on the AR reports, right? I spend a lot of time on the stock market, right? The reason I'm rich, so to speak, is because of stocks, right? Mostly. Not really because I have a great salary or whatnot. Even though I make a pretty good salary, it is, of course, mostly through investment, right? So we can see here, right, this is the current, what they own here. Fragbite, Funrock, so on. So Fragbite owns a lot of companies, right? And with the previous, they owned more companies. So they had to bankrupt this company, right? And that's why that's the biggest failure this year, right? The company was forced bankruptcy. And if you don't go and read this year's report, you will find all about him, how much $1 million they lost them, right? Again, a terrible fate for this company. I mentioned this earlier, right? But the reason this company failed this year is simply because it couldn't get another, basically, money sack, right? So you can see it here. The company was bought up by Fragbite, right? Last year, 2 years now, in October 23, but in 24 terms here, right? This is like the third or fourth time whenever this company is saved, right, by being bought yet but not a company. So they keep being alive because other companies keep investing into them, you know what I mean? However, they couldn't find a new company to invest into them 2024, right, or find a publisher. And that then made this company go bankrupt, which made the owner company, Fravid, also go bankrupt. So not only they bankrupt this company, they actually bankrupt the whole, concern, right, with several different studios. So this is a massive failure. And I know people talk about it too much. Again, basically, right, this is by far the biggest, collapse this year, where you have a daughter company that was recently bought to, right? Imagine if they never bought this company 2 years ago. Then they wouldn't be in bankruptcy now, you know what I mean? They only lose them. I don't know how much they paid for it, but let's say they paid. Well, actually, I did read how much how much money they got in share value. So but this was kind of funny though, because the founders company, right? They didn't get any money for this thing. They got shares, right, in the new company, the bottom, right? And now those shares are worth nothing, and they usually aren't allowed to sell those shares in a certain number of years or whatever, right? So they also sold their company for nothing. Right? They lost like millions of Swedish crowns in this thing. So it's the whole thing is just a disaster for everywhere you go around, right? But what I heard at least, this game was supposed to be released in 23 even, right? So it's already like 1 year delayed. Now they're saying it's released this year, 25, on Steam, which I must doubt because no one works that company anymore. But the game basically is finished too, so it's very, very strange. The whole thing is very strange. This is basically such a massive blunder, right? And the same thing with this company's previous game that also no one ever bought, right? That it's just a massive bankruptcy and used a lot of money, but you still haven't heard about it. As I keep saying, it's shocking, number one, right? Because this is a massive mistake, just a massive issue, yet no one heard about it. That's why you can understand that this is the reason no one wants to invest into it again, right? Because no publisher could sell this game, right? You know what I mean? So it's the most unknown, biggest mistake, but at the same time also proves why the publisher was correct. Because Tencent for a while was gonna publish this game, and this game then and this company was listed on the whole, working with Tencent and the Chinese government, but they then basically got fired by Tencent. I'll say something. Tencent has you're not good enough for us. I don't know, man, yeah. But I digress. But it's interesting, at least. But like I said, as a side note, right, I made a video about this earlier when it happened last year. You can learn so much stuff, right, going into these reports and actually, reading these, like, you can read all the revenue reports, right? But I think it's interesting, as I said earlier, that not only did it crash per se, right, like the daughter company, but they also brought with them the whole concern. And the whole concern owns, like I showed you earlier, 4 other companies. So they all went bankrupt. So they bankrupted like the whole, hundreds of jobs, right, by doing this. So there actually is a lot of money thinking about it. Just from a value standpoint, right, now this company is worth $5 million on the stock market. It is still worth $5 million. But if you go back here, right, it was worth, over 10 times the amount, right? It was worth like, what is that, like 12 times the amount and 30 times the amount? So think about that, $5 million a day. It actually was worth $60 million, right? So that's like a loss of $55 million in 2 months. So again, it's not, I know it's not the Sony Concord figures, right? But for a company that basically is worth roughly then, let's say $60 million, right? Losing $55 million, that is, that's worse than for Sony, right? So it's less money than Sony, but it's like, but that is the value here, though. Also, IP and so on, all the stuff valuable, right? But yeah, something like that, right? So I think it's a good way to think about it, that it's kind of like when you also invest yourself, right? I always tell people how to invest stuff. You should invest based on your own total value, right? So for example, if I want to invest into like a meme stock, like a little scary stock, right? Maybe I only want to invest, let's say, 1 to 5% of my total money, right? And I keep saying it's my money, right? So if you have $1,000, you shouldn't invest more than, let's say, $50, right, in a meme stock. But if you have $1 million, you can invest, $5,000, right? And I think that's how much people think about, honestly, in the stock market. And that's why the rich get richer, right? Because you can take bigger chances, but actually you usually have the same risk-reward percentage based on your own total money, right? But you can, that means more, right? The more money you have, the more you can put it into the market and so on without taking on more risk, right? So a company like this going from $60 million to $5 million is obviously way worse than like Sony going from $1 billion to less $1 billion. Yeah, it's like, okay, but so I think it's fair to say. And the only reason Dustborn, right, isn't doing the same thing is that Dustborn is completely saved by the Norwegian government, right? No, but seriously, yeah, the Nordic company, they probably should have the exact same pattern as Dustborn, but Dustborn is just like, they don't have any stocks, it's just like paid by the government of Norway. It's terrible. But anyway, that's the biggest flop this year, and I think it honestly is objectively true, right? Again, the company completely collapsed. You can look at data yourself. I call it Fragbyte. Go and look at the EO report I showed you earlier, right? You can read through it all, and you won't. I don't think you won't. Like I said, you probably won't find a game company that lost so much of its stock value and like inherent value this year, right? Like I said, 99% lost value, down to a few $1 million left. All the millions is gone, right? I think the revenue, we saw the revenue earlier there. They had a revenue of $23 million 2023, right? So if you lose almost $60 million then in like 2 months, that's 3 times your yearly revenue, right? That means that you will obviously go bankrupt, but it means that you will have like at least 3 years until you get the money back, right? So you make the money back. It's just insane and terrible. But actually, another thing I saw too is that this is for 2023, but if you look at the revenue for 2024, this is the first for 2024 here, they actually only made 50 million Swedish crowns. And also they're making less money actually this year as well, right? Just regardless of the bankruptcy. Because you can see here that the first 9 months they made 150. So that they're roughly gonna make 200. Maybe they make more in the winter to post, but that is still is like an offset of like, see they make about 50 millions per quarter. So that's like an offset of another 30 million or less than, not even going for the money loss. You also just have a lower revenue. So it's gonna take even longer time. Yeah, it's gonna take even longer time then. So this year they're only gonna make about $20 million in revenue gain then. So it will take them 3 years to regain those losses, right? But anyway, hope you liked the video, right? And like I said, end of the day, right? I think that's the winner, and I really do think so, because I mean, how can you even compare the other companies to a company that actually went bankrupt, and just pulled them with them 5 or 6 other companies together, right? So basically, if you understand what I meant earlier, to summarize that, right? You have a company which is owned by another company, right? Typically, daughter company. And the daughter company failed so hard again after another failure of delays and so on, including a publisher, that they just had to go bankrupt, that company. And they led the whole concern, right? Like this, the owner that owns another 5 or 6 studios had to bankrupt that company, and then the whole stock market collapsed, right? And they lost like 99% then of course of their value, and that basically makes all those other 5, 6 whatever studios also go bankrupt, right? Because no one's going to invest into the company, they won't get any money and so forth, right? And as you can see there too, they're also making less revenue and all that stuff, right? So it's kind of like, I suppose, what I imagine would happen with Ubisoft maybe. But like I said earlier, I think Ubisoft won't honestly get there. I think that I agree with people that actually, I'm not going to give you stock trades here, but I agree with people that it feels like Ubisoft is just too big to fail, right? Too many famous IPs, so they probably will be bought by someone else. With this company here, not that tiny, right? I showed you guys, they were making like $23 million, gain that year, right? So not a tiny company per se, but still tiny, of course, compared to Ubisoft, right? Obviously, tiny in that sense, but otherwise like a AA, right? And yeah, those companies can obviously go bankrupt unless people save them. But there is some history, like I mentioned, that company earlier had Tencent money in there, and Tencent actually backed out because the fact they were too terrible and so on. So there is more complicated stuff there to know about. But yeah. This is the video, guys. I hope you guys like it. Subscribe to the like button. I didn't want to dwell too much on the economy, but I think it's just more important in a game like that, where the game is just kind of boring. It's an FPS game that no one's gonna care about anyway. But it's more like, look at this thing here, okay? This actually is worse, right? And I bring it up too because I think it's important to understand, right, that even if Ubisoft is failing and Concord is failing and so on, right? We have to also understand that there are other worse companies. No, my point is that, like I said, that Sony losing like hundreds of millions of dollars, right, on Concord is bad, of course, but because Sony is a giant company, it actually doesn't affect them that much, right? Where another company that only has the value of, let's say, $100 million, and they lose that money, right? All that money is suddenly worth zero, right? So that's the thing too, that, because we're all talking about go woke or broke and the whole concept that, no, Sony will finally learn, Namco Bandai will finally learn with Unknown 9, yada yada. We keep dreaming that these companies will learn, and maybe they will learn, but I hope you see my point is that they still haven't lost enough, honestly, right? Ubisoft, though, has lost a lot of money, so they might have lost enough, but Sony, I would say, with Concord, that's not enough. Sony is a giant, right? Sony is too big still, and it's not affected by this Concord loss enough, I think, to change their mind, actually, unfortunately, right? So that's why I bring it up as number one, too, because you have to really think about it. Like I said, my own investment, my own money, right? The mixture of how much money something actually worth compared to what money you have, right? But anyway, guys, please subscribe, so on, and still have a great day.